Good evening, folks. Welcome to our fifth and final meeting on the middle school configuration. I would like to introduce the people to my left and right before we go through some formal comments and report, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. And we need to use the mic because it's on BevCam. I think everybody can hear me without it, but we need to use it. So, to my left, we have Mayor Mike Cahill, members of the school committee, president of the board, Paul Manzo, Lorinda Vishnik, Anne Marie Chaser, and Chris Silverstein, who co-chaired a task force, visited schools, middle schools, looked at 6-8, looked at 5-8. They'll both be reporting out on their research. Matt Kavanaugh and Dave Manzi. On this side of the ledger, we have Stacy Busick, SPED programs and early childhood programs. Dr. Tom Jefferson, superintendent of schools in Linfield, who tried to bring someone from another community that has a middle school configuration in Linfield, is the 5-8 state model for school building assistants. So that's why Dr. Jefferson is tonight. Matt Posk is the middle school principal. Lisa Oliver is the middle school principal and her adjustment counselor. Thank you. My name is Dr. Al Genziano. I'm the interim superintendent of schools, and I want to formally welcome you. What we've been doing in relation to these meetings is it's an opportunity for Beverly to build a new middle school. The present middle school has done wonders. A number of people have passed through the doors of Briscoe. It's somewhere between 92 and 94 years old, and when you get to be 94, 92, 95, whatever the year is, systems begin to break down, and it needs an awful lot. But we're holding on to make it last. But we have an opportunity that is presented to us, and at the door there was educational specifications that is a draft copy, but it's a 55%, 45%, 55%. The state will be paying for us to build a new middle school. Presently, we're looking at the memorial building site because the present site at Briscoe can't handle a new configuration of that size. So we are looking at memorial, and it appears that it's big enough and sound enough, the land and everything, to build a new middle school. So we are prepared to go 6-8, which we presently have, or 5-8. And we will explain to you why we think 5-8 helps us with the tight space constraints placed on us in our 5K5 buildings. So with that, we'll keep going, and there'll be more information presented to you tonight, and we'll all be available for questions. But I'd like to turn it over to the building principal in Cove, Lisa Oliver. Lisa?
Good evening. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what Cove School will look like if 5th grade is here, and what it will look like if 5th grade moves on to a new middle school. As Dr. Genziano previously spoke about, we're looking at space. Numbers, I've been in Beverly now, this is only my 2nd year, and already numbers are rising here at Cove. We're the 2nd largest building in the district. Last year when I got here, we had 2 full-time kindergartens. We now have 3. Numbers next year look like we'll have 3 again, or we will have 3. We previously had 3 first grade classrooms. We now have 4. Next year I'm looking at adding an additional 2nd grade because I still need my 4 first. So as you can imagine, this is causing space issues. So presently we're very lucky to have an art room, a music room. We still have our science lab intact. We have our computer lab intact. As numbers begin to rise, and I need classroom space, I need to look at those additional spaces, which is not a benefit to our students here at Cove. I want to maintain our science lab. I want to maintain our music and our art rooms. They're important. A thought was breaking down the media lab and using that as a classroom. I'm not ready to do that yet, but I need to come up with an innovative plan to make room for the additional students that are coming in. So space is certainly an issue. Also, presently, as you can see, the cafeteria is good size. We do presently have different configurations for lunch. I have one lunch period where there is not a space in this room. And that's more of unstructured time, can sometimes be challenging. We need additional people in here to help out with that. And as numbers begin to rise, we need to think about those things. But it's the classroom space that I'm most concerned about. So this would be helpful to maintain all the things that I'm talking about. I also want to introduce my adjustment counselor, Eileen Conway, who is going to speak a little bit about what the social emotional piece is, which I think is a concern for many people, and she can enlighten you on that. So Eileen Conway.
Thank you. We have electricity going here. First, I want to say, I know that Dr. Jefferson is here. I'm actually a parent in Linfield, where two of my children, one has been through the middle school, one is in the middle school, and my baby is going on to the middle school next year. And so it's different with the babies. So for those of you who are thinking about your babies going on to middle school as fourth graders merging into fifth graders, I understand all of those feelings, because it also depends on what your child's emotional makeup is and who that child is. But I've lived it as a parent, so I can speak to you from that framework as well. I have loved my experience at Cove. I love this will be my first class that I have seen through from kindergarten all the way through fifth grade. So I have an emotional attachment to these particular fifth graders because I've seen them since they were 5. And
I haven't seen any, and there's none that sort of in the craft discussions, people see that it makes a big difference. Some of it depends on, where the kids are. In Connecticut, I know they used to give their state exams in the fall. And that was a real advantage for K through 6 schools, for the 6th grade level, because they hadn't just done a transition to a new school. Now that the tests are really all done in the spring, I haven't seen anything that bears that out in terms of one model inherently being better than the other. One does give you a little bit more flexibility.
Dr. Jefferson, before you sit down, I just want to flesh out, you talked about going to 3 teacher teams with your 5th graders. Was part of that so that you didn't ask a teacher whose expertise was in English language arts to teach science, or a teacher whose expertise was in math to take on social studies? Is that part of what you gained?
Yeah, some of that was really about playing to the strengths of the teachers. Now, interestingly enough, there was an article that appeared in Education Week, which is the leading education journal, just yesterday, talking about a movement that's starting to emerge in the country to have more departmentalization within elementary schools. And they were talking about 3rd through 5th. And departmentalization could be switching with 2 teachers where you hadn't done that in the past. Mike's point is a good one. We saw an instructional problem. Our math scores were not where they needed to be. And we made that a very specific target of the school improvement plan, and we directed a lot of resources towards that issue. One of which was, we said we were going to get 3 strong math teachers in the 5th grade. So quite honestly, the 5th grade teachers wanted to each teach their own math section. The principal I said, thank you for the input, but we're going to override you on this one. So we made an administrative decision, and enforced the fact that we needed 3 really strong people who we would then have work together. One of the quirks of 5th and 6th grade has to do with certification. This is getting more into the weeds of the question. Under state certification laws, if you're certified K through 6, you can't just teach one subject all day long. You have to teach at least a second subject. So the way we organized was to have a math teacher who taught 3 sections, a science teacher who taught 3 sections, and a language arts teacher who taught 3 sections, and all 9 of them teach a humanities course that we created, which included the social studies, but also helped us address the language arts objectives. And again, we could do that because of the numbers and the flexibility. So We found some people who weren't so good at teaching language arts who were great science teachers, and that's what they get to do all day long. So you do find that by 5th grade, I think kids are ready to handle the switch in the departmentalization. And in this case, the teachers also cherished it as well, because they said, before I had to be, expert and do preparations in 3 different subjects. The 2 main ones that they taught and whatever kind of leftover ones. So we reduced their preparation, increased their expertise, and really allowed us to do much better work in terms of the common assessments and mining the data and making changes and supports we needed. So I think it's a fair question, but there's not going to be a vivid number that comes through looking at the score stable.
I just wanted to answer the specific question regarding MCAS. MCAS has been in existence for almost 20 years, and as a superintendent in an urban setting in Somerville for 12 years, we did before school, during school, and after school, did everything humanly possible to get every senior to pass MCAS and graduate. It is a struggle, and it starts really early on. And because we're a race to the top school district, MCAS is done. If you go on our website on the front page, I have a letter. There's a brand new test that we're piloting, and next year, statewide, MCAS is gone. There's a brand new test. In order to get Race to the Top funding, you have to go through this. So MCAS was based on, we were #1 in 50 states. We scored the best in English language arts, and the best in mathematics, and the best in science. No longer, it's gone. So the empirical data we can no longer use, it's gone. So starting, if you want to go on our website, I have on one hand, on the right-hand side, what we did this past year on MCAS, and then I have a letter to all the parents regarding the new test that we're piloting, and next year it will be the test throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So sadly, because we're a Race to the Top district, MCAS is no longer in existence after next year. Okay, thank you.
One of the things that we did as our research, we were assigned different schools. So I was assigned to research Lowell, and in Lowell, the bulk of their schools are 5 through 8, but they do have 2 schools that are K through 8, and they're a district, as is Amesbury, that's very seriously considering putting their 5th graders back down. And when I spoke with them at some more at length, found out that they treat their 5th graders the same as they treat their 8th graders. They have multiple, like 4, 5, 6 teachers during the day. They transition, they're all out in the hallway all at the same time. But if you just ask them on the surface, why are you going to send your 5th graders back down? They will tell you because they're seeing a downward spike in their 5th grade MCAS scores. However, the principals of those 5 through 8 schools, even though they all want to push their 5s down, they'll also tell you that the 2 K through 8 schools don't see that drop. They don't see that downward spike. They are seeing it rebound and come back up and be in an appropriate place in 6, so that's quote unquote just that transition year that there's that downward spike. But when we looked at, when I called the K through 5, the K through 8 schools to find out why did they think they weren't seeing that little dip, or a dramatic dip in the 5th grade, they treat their 5th graders in 2 teacher teams, right? The whole list that Chris gave about these are the things you should do if you want to have a successful 5 through 8 model. That's how the K through 8s are operating right now. So there isn't this drastic change for the 5th graders, rather it was a gradual change. So that's one piece of data for you. And Amesbury was the same way. Chris investigated Amesbury. The other piece of data is I looked at
Committee and entered here into the doors of Cove. That being said, Stacey Busick, who is my former boss, my principal here, and Lisa All, and I can all speak to. 5th grade is one of those interesting grades. We have some 10-year-olds, we have some 11-year-olds with the cutoff date being in September. There's quite a range in in ages in children who are in 5th grade. And developmentally, a lot of them, the majority of them, are really, they could really be ready to move on. Of course, they would like to stay, you know, perhaps in the comfort of the school that they've always known. But there's excitement that builds at the end of each year as they develop both physically and emotionally. And, you know, we really feel as though that's something that they could absolutely handle. The other piece of it is 5th and 6th graders, and many of you may have gotten these brochures as you walked in. These are called yardsticks, and they're based on our responsive curriculum, responsive classroom curriculum, which is used throughout the district as part of our social emotional curriculum. And yardsticks is great. Even us who work with the kids all the time will occasionally go back and read these and say, aha, that makes sense, because it's a really nice breakdown of where children are based on age developmentally in their social development. And when you leave here tonight, or as you're flipping through, if one of us tends to start to make you get a little sleepy at this time of evening, you may want to flip through and see there's many similarities in the developmental place that 5th and 6th graders are. And even if you just look on the cover, 5th graders are 9, 10, 11, and 6th graders are typically 10, 11, and 12. So 10 is sort of that middle ground. So you can have 10-year-old 5th graders, 10-year-old 6th, and 10-year-old 6th graders as well. And there are a lot of similarities. One of the things that I've heard a lot of research on is that by the time kids get to 5th grade, they're really ready to embark on participation in clubs and organizations and those sorts of things. In a middle school environment, we have a little bit of that sort of after-school programming, but middle school really lends itself to that kind of participation, to that kind of broader social connection. Also, there are a lot of benefits to 6th graders as well. 6th graders can sort of go either way, and it depends, because the 6th graders of today may not be what the 6th graders were 20 years ago. They could either identify more with the 7th or 8th graders, or they can stay a little bit younger and identify with the 5th graders as well. So it can go either way, but there are benefits to both. But we feel really confident that 5th and 6th graders together is a good thing, because they are so similar. In the Linfield Middle School, the 5th and 6th graders are on a separate floor. I don't know enough about the configuration and all of the powers that be could probably tell you more about that. But 5th and 6th grade is very separate in my kids' school. They're on a separate floor. It's never the twain shall meet during the day, and there are opportunities to really maintain a very sort of separate environment, yet giving them all the benefits of the space that a facility can offer and that program can offer for them. So, and I'll be around after if people have any questions.
Good evening, my name is Matthew Boston, I'm the principal of Briscoe Middle School. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to talk about the potential for our new middle school configuration. A key word that we've been talking about in a lot of these forums is the word opportunity, and you'll hear that throughout this evening. This is a tremendous opportunity for us as a school district and for us as a community to shape our future. Our goal as school leaders is to create safe, small learning environments for all of our students. The potential for a 5-8 middle school allows us to do that by creating a designated 5-6 learning area and a designated grade 7 and 8 learning area. Students would spend the majority of their time in these academic areas. There will be common areas such as a cafeteria, a gym, an art classroom, etc. Yet, when the students are in those common areas, it would just be that grade at that time. For example, when grade 5 would be in gym, it would just be with grade 5 students. When grade 7 students were at lunch, it would just be grade 7 students at lunch. Approximately 3 years ago, there was an ad hoc committee that was put together to investigate various grade configurations for the entire district, K to 12. I was fortunate enough to be on that committee, along with other members of this group here. When we did all of our research, the literature shows that by limiting the amount of transitions that a student has during the course of their academic career, you're increasing student achievement. With that being said, a K-8 model may be one of the best models, but that was quickly put to the side because it's not realistic for us here in Beverly at this time. Yet a 5-8 middle school allows us the opportunity to build more community and support within a 4-year span due to a longer period of time in one building. Another thing is I'm very biased about my PTO. It's a small, very hard-working group that does tremendous work for all of our students and staff at Bristol. The opportunity to work with parents over a 4-year span really is a benefit for all middle school students. The middle school philosophy promotes building connections within a small learning community. This philosophy can be supported utilizing a 5-8 model, whether it be a 5-6 lower school and a 7-8 upper school. The potential would be in a 5-6 lower school model, we have 2-person teams. So teachers, it would be 2 teachers on a team. One teacher would teach English and social studies, another teacher would teach math and science. There would be approximately 50 students on each team. In grade 7-8, there would be 4-person teams as we currently have. A teacher for English, math, social studies, and science. Again, as you heard Ms. Conway say, and the literature supports this, developmentally, it is very appropriate for students in grade 5 and 6 to be grouped together, and students in grades 7 and 8 to be grouped together. When we start talking about the curriculum, an advantage of the 5-8 configuration is that it allows for stronger, more consistent implementation of the curriculum within the lower school and upper school models. In addition, the experience of the grade 5 teachers working with the grade 4 curriculum and have previous experience working with grade 4 staff will strengthen the vertical curriculum articulation. The potential for this plan also includes the opportunity for all students to participate in our expressive arts offerings, including PE, health, computers, tech ed, and art. We would also be looking to expand our foreign language offerings into grade 6, as well as what we currently offer, expand foreign language into grade 5, as well as expand what we currently have in grade 6. It would offer daily, consistent instruction for science and social studies in grade 5. Additionally, students would have the opportunity to participate in band or chorus and have this built into their daily schedule. All students, as you heard Ms. Conway talk about before, would have access to appropriate extracurricular programming. And we're currently in
the Boston Magazine top ranking of the schools. So Beverly's won 14 this year. I looked at the top 20 and the bottom 20, and curious to see, what models are in each of those, and the breadth of the criteria that they use to make the determination is wider than 2 computer screens. And one of them, though, is MCAS scores. One of the criteria is how many of your students who take advanced placement classes score a 3, 4, or 5 on a scale of 5. And so there's all kinds of criteria in there. How much money do you spend? What's your class size? What I found in the top 20 were they're all different models. They weren't all 6 through 8. They weren't all 5 through 8. They weren't all K through 8. There was a lovely little mix in between there. I would say number 7 was Lincoln, and they actually do a 4 through 8 model. Really, really oddball. At one school, and then another school, they have 5, 6, and then 7, 8. So a real eclectic mix there. Yet they're number 7 in the state in terms of these rankings. And again, at the bottom, it's not like there's a real pattern at the bottom either. There's also a mix. So I think that that kind of gave me a little bit of reassurance that it's not the model at all. It's not even class sizes. So if we look at some of the schools down at the bottom are spending just as much money per pupil, and they have just as small a class size as some of those top 20 schools. So yeah, I really was perplexing. Okay, so what is it that you're not doing, or what are you doing wrong that has you in the bottom 20 compared to the top 20? Because those leading indicators, those really easy to put your finger on type of indicators, the model, how much money per pupil, and your class size, those are the same with some of the bottom 20 as with the top 20. So there are some spikes in Massachusetts, so that's why I wanted to specifically address that, and we interviewed 2 of those spikes. And we believe that the reason why is because the way they're treating their 5th graders.
Katie, I have a couple kids at Ayers and one eventually will be at Ayers as well. And also to give you a little background, I've taught 14 years in Linfield, 9 at the middle school, and I'm actually in a different middle school in Haverhill, which is also a 5-8 model, and all in special ed. And I'm a huge proponent of 5-8. I think they're great models. I would strongly encourage you to vote yes for the 5-8 model. But I do have a question too. One that I was wondering, this is kind of piggybacks on what Mr. Jefferson said, was, is the school committee and the mayor willing to pay extra for funds that may be for spaces that go beyond what the state has designated as you know, they do that ratio of how many students you're gonna get, and they say you can have so many square footage because the second gymnasium isn't critical. There's no way you can do one gym in a school with 1,400 kids. In a school of 800, I mean, that gym is used, there's 2 classes per period, running in one gym all day, period. The Schoolman right now is 500 kids. They do have recess for all 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders. That gym is used all day in April, and there's only one gym. So I was wondering if, in addition to special ed spaces, being a special educator, I mean, going beyond whatever they give you, there's never enough space. I mean, I know Bill's already capped out or using up common areas. So I guess, is the city willing to go and pay extra? Is that a possibility to pay 100% of additional spaces? And then my other question was, because of a bigger building, there's a lot more transition time, so you lose time on learning with periods. So I was wondering if when the next contract comes up, if that's going to be a discussion point to increase the length of the school day.
Thank you. I think on the first question, as you know, if there's something we want to do that goes beyond what MSBA is willing to fund, we can still choose to do that, but we'll fund that piece of the cost fully. So I don't think it's a non-starter to have that conversation. I think that would be a value judgment that we would all need to make, and the city council would weigh in on that as well. So specifically, if the discussion arises as to whether we should build a bigger or a second gym, that would be a very specific conversation. And yeah, it wouldn't be a non-starter, but it would be a set of value judgments and decisions we'll need to make if that comes up. Because put money to that money isn't billed to put to something else, right? It's common sense. But is that fairly said? Anybody want to add to that? And then the length of the day hasn't been brought up before. Thanks for bringing it up. The idea that when the kids need to go further to get to their specialist, for example, or to get to lunch, does that factor into, okay. Sure, I mean, I think we'll need to be efficient in movement so that time on learning can be maximized. And I'll leave anything beyond that to Mr. Kavanaugh.
Yeah, just quickly, the length of the school day has come up, and it is something that we are discussing with you. We are in a contract here. And I think that because of a lot of different issues, logistical issues, there's probably something that's going to be studied. And I think what we're going to, those negotiations are ongoing, but I think what we're going to try to do is to get union representatives and administrators together to discuss how that would work and what that would look like. That is something that's on the radar, it's something that we have to discuss, so we have that information.
And School Committee Kavanaugh has been on the negotiations committee, so he's kind of got that insight. It's a great point timing-wise because we would be into the next contract after this next one at that point. Contracts are typically 3 years, and we're talking about a school that would be ready to occupy in 3 to 4 years. So we would have that opportunity to do some study and to determine whether it's something that can be pushed forward. Other questions? Yes. We were happy to be back here.
I was very happy. I can't hold this guy. Hi, Leslie Fry. I have a child here in Cove now who's in the 2nd grade, and I have a child who is in preschool who will be coming in a couple of years. So, in all honesty, when this plan first came out, my gut reaction was no. And then I did my own research and found that there were some troubling trends with not just the 5th grade plan, but with the 6th grade plan. The reason why there's not much on the 5th grade plan is because it's a relatively new, I think we can all agree, this is a relatively new configuration within any educational system. But specifically, what I found was
the process of investigating expanding our interscholastic athletic offerings, thus further advancing our school culture. Another important aspect to consider is the opportunity that this affords our special education programming. It will create more continuity and consistency with all the programs at the middle school level. Ms. Busick's going to talk a little bit more about this when she speaks to you, but the bottom line is it gives Beverly students the opportunity to go to school in their home district, as they should. We all know and recognize that it's time for a new building. Our job is to allow our school committee and our leaders to make informed decisions about what is best for us at this time. As you heard Dr. Argentiano say, it's a 6-8 model. We're familiar with that model. We're going to continue to improve upon that model to make sure our students have what's best for them. However, a 5-8 model allows the opportunity for increased programming opportunities for all of our students, K to 8. It provides the elementary schools the opportunity to investigate expanding their programs due to the additional space that they would have at the elementary level. Yet with all this opportunity, we do recognize there are concerns that have to be addressed. What about buses? What about the grade 5 play? What is it going to look like by limiting contact with the older students between the upper school and lower school? Would there be extended daycare for our grade 5 students? Will there be grade 5 recess? It's come up a lot. And we have with the opportunity to plan over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years, we could appropriately address all these concerns going forward. In preparation for these forums, a variety of us went and visited schools throughout the Commonwealth who had various 5-8 models. You're going to hear some of these stories along with Dr. Jefferson as well. I think the bottom line, from a big picture point of view, this is a wonderful opportunity to address issues within our district to support all of our students K to 8. This time I'd like to introduce our Director of Special Education, Ms. Stacy Busen.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. So my role is to talk about this from the perspective of early childhood and also special ed programming across the district. So in consideration of moving to a 5 to 8 model, one of the things that we've heard is that space would open up at the elementary levels, space that right now is lacking in many buildings. I think one of the things across the district the principals have been able to do is to think creatively regarding space, but unfortunately, there comes a point where you can't even be creative anymore. So from the early childhood perspective, one of the things we can start to consider moving forward if we have space open up in our elementary schools is our kindergarten program. Currently, we have a half-day and full-day program running across the district, and one of the reasons we continue to have the half-day programs is we don't have the space to increase kindergarten classrooms to make full-day programs across the district. So this gives us the opportunity to start discussions and planning around potentially having full-day throughout the district. The other piece, too, that we can look forward to considering is our preschool programming. If you've had a child in our preschool programming in the district, you'll know that it's a very transient program. They get moved around based on space. So if you've had a child in our preschool program over the past few years, by the time your child hits first grade, they could potentially have had 3 to 4 transitions from building to building. So we're hoping moving forward that we can eliminate that and kind of decrease the amount of transitions with our early childhood students. From the special ed perspective across the district, one of the things it will do is it will give us the ability to look at our special ed programming. So we've tried really hard to expand our offerings of programming in the districts, but we kind of come up against a lack of space or classroom space to do that effectively with all of our programs. So again, having additional space gives us the opportunity to consider what programs we have that need to be expanded, and then what programs we do not have that we need to create to meet the needs of our students moving forward. The other piece too, and it just doesn't impact our special ed students, but it impacts our gen ed students as well. If you've ever been in a building, interventions are happening in buildings, in hallways and libraries due to lack of space. So instruction's happening in very busy areas of buildings. So again, we can provide more opportunities for improved space for our instructional offerings at the elementary level. One of the things, too, moving forward and looking at, and I think you're going to hear the research from some of the school committee members, is, you know, there's different models, and we've mentioned, Mr. Costa mentioned a K to 8 model, which our district does not have the ability to bring K to 8 models into the district. But one of the things that has been common throughout the research, and something to think about, that it's really about the quality of your staff, the quality of instruction, the quality of your programming, and also providing a safe environment. So again, there's lots of things to look at moving forward, but one of the pieces too, when we start thinking about our programming, we have a lot of students out of district,
We'd like to be able to give them the opportunity to be instructed in their home district as well. So that means that, moving forward, we're providing more opportunities for students who haven't had the opportunity over the past several years. I believe Mr. Mayor Cahill is speaking next.
Thank you, Mr. Busick. Thank you all for being here and spending time with us tonight. You'll hear from a few more of us, and then we'll get to you. And we're hoping to be there by the end of the first hour, so we'll have a full hour for your thoughts and questions and such, so we can have a real dialogue at that point. I want to share with you a couple of the process details regarding our decision-making process and the school building process. So first, we've got our 7 school committee members, and you're 7 elected board school committee members, and then me as your mayor. So we're the 7 voting members. We will be meeting tomorrow night at 7:30, right, at Memorial, and we'll be discussing the question of the grade configuration, and eventually tomorrow night, at the end of that meeting, taking a vote on it. That is something that we're doing in this timetable so that we can move forward with the building project. You've heard, we've all heard for some time that we've been trying to build a middle school that we can open in the fall of 2017. That was kind of the way it was kind of presented over the last couple of years. We're finding, the further we get into this process, we're finding that it is going to be incredibly hard, if not impossible, to be able to open the doors of a new school in the fall of 2017. We've been meeting pretty regularly with the folks at the School Building Authority, and we're actually ahead of schedule right now, where the phase we're in now is called the eligibility period.
Was that students who were moved from K through 6 to 6 through 8, the 6th graders were exhibiting twice as many disciplinary problems as the K through 6 model. I can only imagine that it's going to be exacerbated with the K through 5. So my first question would be, what are the steps that the school committee is planning to take to deal with the additional disciplinary problems? Are there going to be additional school resource officers from the Beverly Police Department? Are there going to be additional transitional help? Are there going to be additional counselors? I know here they have Serenity, who's the therapy dog here, which is a great thing. Are they planning on having that as well at the 5 through 6? What is the plan to deal with that? In addition, as we know, with regard to and in contact with these students,
Just sit right there. We'll answer first.
Okay.
I'll give you the microphone back. I'm going to ask Mr. Plasko to speak, but I will say that, like other considerations, if we go 5 to 8, we're going to have 3 to 4 years to plan, and we have now established relationships with a number of school districts that are 5 to 8, and you raise it. It's a very good question to be on the table. Hearing it, we've heard it before, but hearing it again, it will clearly be one of the issues that we need to plan for, and to look to the experience other districts have had, and whether that, what you're suggesting, that spike in disciplinary issues and concerns is something that they've experienced and deal with on an annual basis. So now I'll just ask Mr. Plasko to share.
We've heard before, certainly any school, and what the answer, every school has its challenges, whatever that challenge may be. So when that challenge comes up, you have to address it. I think one of the ways to address that problem is talking about the transitions. Currently, right now, we go to great length to have appropriate transitions for our grade 5 students coming into grade 6 to make sure that transition works appropriately. As we go forward, we make sure those transitions continue going from grade 8 to grade 9, so we know those are difficult transition years. Starting that process in grade 4 will certainly help that issue. Ms. Conway has talked about what's in place at the elementary schools for all the districts, the responsive classroom. And I think the responsive classrooms at the elementary level have done a very good job eliminating or decreasing the amount of discipline referrals at the elementary level. There is a middle school component of that. We're currently investigating and looking at some PBIS strategies, positive behavior intervention strategies, going throughout our schools, particularly the middle school, to address these issues. So I think as issues come up, as discipline issues come up, we certainly have to address them. But our goal is to make sure we have a safe environment. Our teachers, and I'm speaking from a middle school standpoint, and maybe biasly again, talking about the grade 6 to 8 model, our middle school teachers go to great lengths to make sure our students feel comfortable. Do discipline issues happen? Yes, they happen in Beverly. They happen in Beverly Hills High School or middle school, wherever that might be. And as situations come about, we have to make sure we address them appropriately going forward, and that's the plan there. You know, you've had some data, you can look at that data. Certainly as data comes up, we have to be aware of that data and making sure we're addressing it to supporting all of our students in that middle school setting. So as Mayor Cahill said, we do have a few years as we get prepare for this transition, whatever it might be. Even if it's a 6-8 model, I think we still have to prepare what is a better model, what can we do best for all of our students at that time. And whatever that model is, we have to make sure our students in Beverly have access to that, and our staff has access to it, and our parents are understanding what we're doing to address those concerns.
Somebody else did ask for more. We're supposed to get a presentation. So there may be more books, I assume.
My second question would be with regard to the models that are out there. I think, although one might not say that it's better than the rest, and my research has shown that K through 8 is actually the preferred model. As we're thinking about building this new building, would it be feasible to have a wing or a place for pre-K and kindergarten to have their own separate school there, to continue 1 through 5 in the elementary schools, which would free up the space, and then to continue with the 6 through 8 model? It kind of allows students and parents to get used to the middle school and have the parents have that investment in the middle school that we're concerned about 3 years versus 4 years. And it also frees up the space in the elementary schools. I was wondering if that had been discussed.
Can I just ask for clarification? What you're saying is we have students who go to the school for K, pre-K, and then they go to an elementary school, and then they come back. I'm not sure I can follow.
What I'm saying is when we build this new building, knowing that we have pre-K that's moving all around the place, my son went to half-day kindergarten, he went to Ayers, then he had to transition to Cove. If you want to talk about transitions, that's an additional transition I didn't want him to have to make. Would it be possible for Beverly to invest in a wing in the building to be a pre-K/kindergarten center there, and then have the grade schools be a 1 through 5 center as opposed to K through 5? There.
So they're,
They would transition after kindergarten as opposed to pre-K to K. They would transition from K to 1.
so you're suggesting a different model than the ones we've been considering, sure. And I think pre-K, yeah. It's not a model we're considering. You know, that's a fair statement. Anybody else want to add to that?
You're not the, somebody has suggested that. I've had at least one conversation on that same idea, so you're not alone. And I personally think that, as President Manzo said, it adds another transition, right? If we can eliminate that or minimize, we're trying to minimize that. I don't personally understand why the person who presented this idea to me said, I don't want my 5th grader with the 7th and the 8s. I said, well, then why is it okay to have a preschooler with the 7th and the 8s? So that was the conversation I had on it. I didn't really, because that was her position on it, haven't really thought any more about that. We just had that particular conversation because that was the particular topic. But it's a model. We haven't called it.
So, I think it's an opportunity to do my pitch for what, my vision pitch for given the last 5 minutes.
Can you speak up, please?
So one of the things I would like to see, if we pull this off, is full-day kindergarten for everyone who wants it at our elementary schools. So one of the options we have is that if we free up space by moving the 5th grade to a middle school building. We have until midsummer to finish it. We're hoping to finish it by March 26th, when the MSBA board will be presenting before them, and they'll hopefully invite us into what's known as the funding pipeline. So we're looking to be several months ahead of schedule, but there are several more phases to the project. We'll need to hire a project manager and a designer. We'll need to do a feasibility study. Then we'll need to design the school. Then we'll need to procure the general contractor. Then we'll need to build the school. Each of those have their own timetable, and if we are to meet the optimal numbers that MSBA projects for us, we will not be opening the school necessarily in the fall of 2017, but perhaps rather sometime into 2018. So it's a process, and there's, you know, it's going to be roughly an $80 million school. As Dr. Argentiano said, the state will be paying roughly 55%, us roughly 45%. So there, you know, these steps are necessary to get it right. So I give you that as a timetable. We're going to be working to meet those optimal timelines every step of the way and even exceed them. So, you know, we still have an opportunity. The reason I'm giving you those dates is because my sense is many of you have younger kids. How many of you have a preschooler right now, or younger? Okay. And how many of you have a kindergartner this year? So if we open the new school during the school year 2017-2018, and we have decided to make it a 5 to 8 school, then your kindergartner will be entering in as a 5th grader. Again, if we vote to make it a 5 to 8 school and it doesn't open until the following school year, it'll be the pre-K kids. Now, you know, we're going to do everything we possibly can to open that school as soon as possible while doing it right every step of the way. We recognize what an amazing resource Briscoe has been for so long, but how much of a challenge it is to keep that building all that the kids and the teachers need it to be between now and the date that we'd open the new school. We know there are a lot of fantastic things going on at Briscoe, and we want to be very sure that the building holds up. And part of that is getting the new school done in a good time frame. So I'll stop now. As I said, you'll hear now from a few more people. First, school committee members, Mrs. Chesa and Mrs. Silverstein, and then our guest from Linfield, Dr. Jefferson. And then we'll get to your questions and thoughts.
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. Some of you I know are saying, you know, how did this all come out? When did it first start? Why didn't I hear about it? In actuality, Beverly first started talking about having 5th grade in middle school 21 years ago. I was on a committee that was formed, and we looked at having 5 and 6 in one building. That's when we had 2 middle schools. And 7 and 8 in the other building. And the reason we considered that is because we really thought that 5th graders were very similar in a lot of developmental ways to 6th graders. And we saw a lot of opportunities for that. But at the time, the decision was made not to move forward with that model. Since that time, and over the last 11 years that I've been on the school committee, we've talked about a lot of different kinds of configurations here in Beverly. Some of it was because of space, some of it was because of money. There's actually been a lot because of money. And is that a good reason to make a decision? No, but sometimes we all know in our own family budgets, you have to live with what you have, and you have to make the best decision you can based on what your resources are. We looked at having sister schools. So we had 6 elementary schools, so there would be a large elementary school paired with a small elementary school. So the smaller school would have had K and 1, and then the larger school would have had 2, 3, 4, 5. We discounted that because we felt it was too many transitions for the kids. Then we looked at, well, could we bring 6th graders back to the elementary schools, and that didn't fit either. Then we looked at having early childhood centers. So we looked at one point we looked at having Canada as an early childhood center, and it didn't fit. Then at another point we looked at having Cove as an early childhood center, and that was taken off the blocks. So over the years, we have really looked at a lot of different kinds of grade configurations. And as I said, a lot of the times it is based on either space or money. And this one is being looked at actually, you know, basically because of space. Like Ms. Busick said, I would like to talk a little bit about the special ed too. Anybody who knows me knows that what I say about our special ed kids in Beverly, those are our most special kids. Those are the kids who deserve everything that we can give to them. And those are the kids that deserve to be in Beverly. Beverly kids should be in Beverly schools. And too often we are sending our kids to some place, you know, however far away, on a bus, away from their neighbors, away from their siblings, because we just don't have space for that program here. And I know that when we have space, that Ms. Busick will develop an amazing program to bring those kids back. In addition to it, it's just the right thing to do because they should be here. It also is an enormous cost savings. You know, an outplacement can cost, you know, upwards of, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. You know, there are programs.
$5,000 to $200,000.
Right. We can spend upwards of $200,000 for one student to be going to a program somewhere else. Think of what we could do with that here. Would it cost us $200,000 to do a program like that here? Absolutely not. The other thing people don't figure into when they look at cost is special ed transportation. Special ed transportation is approximately $1.2 million. Now think if those kids are going to school in Beverly, and they're going to whether it be the Hannah School or the Cove School, as opposed to going to school in Neshoba, because that's where there's a program for them. It's not right for a kid to be leaving the district, it's not right for a kid to be on a bus for that long, and it's not right for it to be costing that much. Because that takes away from them, and it takes away from all of your kids. So, but it's the right thing to do because Beverly kids should be in Beverly schools. So I think it's just most important that people realize this is not some snap decision. This is something that's been talked about off and on for literally 21 years. And I think the time, now that we're really gonna get into middle school, I mean, it's really gonna happen. That's the amazing thing. I think we should all be looking at this as we are so blessed to be living here in Beverly, where we have amazing elementary schools, a fabulous high school, and if you haven't seen it, find a reason to go. High school plays in about 3 weeks, musical is in about 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. If you can, go up and see it, bring your kids, because you will be blown away at what high school kids can do. But go up and see that high school. And then as you walk around the high school, say, oh my gosh, our middle school is going to be even better than this, because it's going to be just that much newer. So we are really blessed to have a community that invests so much time, energy, and money into our schools. So once again, thank you for coming.
We now have space to expand the full-day kindergarten program. And so what that would do is it would create a population of students who would be in this building and the other elementary buildings from K through 4. So you get 5 years in this building, 5 years for Mrs. Oliver and other principals and teachers to know those students. Top it off with 4 years in the middle school so that Mr. Posca can get to know those students, and an additional 4 years at the high school. What I think that will do is it provides more continuous blocks of time at each level for these students to develop. The one piece of the puzzle that doesn't work with it is the preschool model. One of the things we're looking at in the preschool population, this is what Mrs. Busick mentioned, was a possibility of moving all the preschool classrooms together in one location. And what that does for us is it provides a continuity of service within that program. It also provides economies of scale, because a lot of the preschool population requires different forms of therapy and specialized service. And so by providing that in one location rather than 5 or 2 as they are presently, we can create a program that's a little more coherent for the preschool population as well. And so, so my focus has been on, I think our focus has been on trying to find a way to provide the best education for each of these different phases of the student's education. And I think 5 years in this building, whether it's 1 through 5 or K through 4, I would rather see a K through 4 model here, because we'll get them in here earlier, we'll get those kindergarten students in here, and provide them all with the same foundation to move on to first grade. So that's what I'd like to see happen. And again, a lot of this is several years down the road when some of you are up here. So, but I think that's what we can do, but that starts with middle school project. We need to get that underway first, and that's what this vote tomorrow night is about. It's about what grades will be in that middle school. There's a lot of work to do after that, tons of it, including how do we create programs, how do we manage schedules, how do we build the building so that it works most effectively for the population that's there. Thanks.
I think we got a few more thoughts on this.
One more thing.
So, and a couple of things. It's not necessarily an additional transition that you're talking about. If your child is doing pre-K in the public school district, it's delaying that transition until after kindergarten. Right? If they're not pre-K in the district, it is adding a transition to their public school experience. And so they're, just to kind of clarify, so it isn't necessarily a new transition or an additional. You do know that some of our pre-K kids are in pre-K in Beverly Public Schools for up to 3 years. You know that when children turn 3, if they've already been identified as having special needs, they become the responsibility of the school district when they turn 3, and they're on an ed plan for services from then on. So some of the kids in our preschool program will be in it for 3 years. And we know that some of them have gone from one building to the next. So if we're able to bring them together in one place and there's a preschool program in one building, then there can be some continuity in that, at that level. And I think as you heard Mr. Manzo say, and I share that, I think a value of having the kindergartners in the elementary schools is one that I share. So that's why when you suggested, I hadn't really been hearing that, but thanks for raising it. A couple other people want to speak to this, and then we'll let you have one more question, and then we'll get to yours.
Thanks. I just want to stay on the topic of making this building any bigger than what the Mass Building Authority will allow for us. That requires taxpayers to agree to that, and already we're getting, comments from the public saying, well, why would we want to spend more money for a 5 to 8 building than a 6 to 8 building? So if we build a whole nother wing for pre-K, we would have to consider how much more would it cost and would the taxpayers be willing to fund that. And speaking as a citizen, that means then what do we do without on the city side? Because it's not really a city budget and a school budget, it's all one big pot. So we have to think about that. The other thing is, 3 years ago when the original ad hoc committee got together to talk about school building configurations, they did look at an early childhood model that would have been housed at that time at Hannah, and then or maybe at Cove, right? And then, thank you, Kathy, for that. Kathy's memory is far better than mine.
Kathy's old.
We don't have that report, but that would require taking all the students in this building, redistricting them across the city, and they were looking at how do we use the buildings we have and kind of separate out an early childhood center. And one of those configurations also included a 5 to 8 middle school or a 6 to 8 middle school. So I can go back and find that for you if you want to see it. And I can't quite remember why they were thinking it wasn't a good feasible model. I think it had
Public opinion. People freaked.
Yeah, people freaked out about
People
losing
freaked out.
their elementary school. Yeah, that's what it was. I should remember that.
Well, this poor Martin, publicly they were talking closing a building and it just wasn't accurate.
I don't want to feed a dead horse at this point. We'll move on to the next question.
And just very quickly, we've been talking a lot about the effect this is going to have on our 5th graders. What research have you been doing into what a K through 4 means for our 4th graders? When I went to school, the 6th graders were the leaders of the school. Now we've made the 5th graders the leaders of the school. Now we're making 4th graders the leaders of the school. So how young is too young for a child developmentally to be in that position, and what research have you done, and what has it shown?
I'll ask Dr. Jefferson to speak to this one.
I've seen schools where the oldest child was in the 4th grade, and the oldest child was in the 5th grade, and the oldest child was in the 8th grade. They all have some pluses and minuses. It's a rite of passage. I think every child relishes that experience.
Hi, thank you for coming. And I just wanted to thank some of the people who helped put some of this research together because, what happened about 3 years ago is this idea came to the table for the school committee, and we were thinking about it way back then. And we did have a forum at Briscoe one evening, and people came to that forum and voiced their concerns. So I went back to my notes from that evening and found the questions that were asked, and we started to talk at the school committee about how do we answer these questions and how do we follow up on some of this and how do we find some research on this topic to help support or not support whichever grade configuration. So we put together a small work committee and started working on this. And there are several 5 to 8 middle schools throughout Massachusetts. And what kind of happened pretty quickly is you talk to one person in Salisbury and they say, oh, I know of a great program in New Hampshire. And it kind of snowballed into, we just kept learning and learning and learning along the way. We learned kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly about middle schools. And we felt like it was important to do this research so that we could make the best decision for all of our students. So over the past few weeks, we we spoke to and either interviewed or visited about 22 middle schools. And these schools ranged from 550 students to 1,400 students. It's projected for us that if we did put our 5th graders into our middle school, there would probably be about 1,300 students in grades 5 to 8 in 2017. So our main question for the administrators that we spoke to was, is a grade 5 to 8 middle school academically superior to a grade 6 to 8 middle school? Because we heard about space, we heard about money, we know what our constraints are, and we know what our issues are, but academically, is one better than another? So here's what we learned. We learned that the districts who were happy with their 5 to 8 middle schools had these things in common. The layout of the school building supported a substantially separate grade 5 and 6 grade configuration, and it was substantially separate from 7 and 8. And there was typically one principal for the whole building, and then 2 vice principals, one for grade 5 and 6 and one for grade 7 and 8. The districts who were happy with their 5 to 8 middle schools also either had self-contained 5th grade classrooms, which is what some of our elementary schools do now in Beverly, or they had at most 2-person teams. And now we're hearing that some are going to 3-person teams in grade 5. The other thing that they were happy with was they were able to preserve the identity of the 5th graders by maintaining recess and by maintaining certain elements that were important to the younger kids. And most of the principals would agree, I think, that the team model worked better than the junior high model that some of us might have experienced. There was also a separate lunch for each grade in some of these buildings, and there was a very thoughtful transition from into middle school with a lot of thought and energy going into the 4th grade teachers communicating with the 5th grade teachers. There was also time spent working with 4th graders preparing them for a transition to a bigger school. One of the things that I think about a lot is, we're talking about kids going from a school of 350 to 500 to a school of 1,300. So that alone could be daunting, right? The other thing that the principals of these 5 to 8 middle schools really liked was keeping extracurricular activities age appropriate. So, they would have roller skate parties for grades 5 and 6 and dances for grades 7 and 8. So, making sure that they met the needs, social, emotional needs of the students. One of the things we heard over and over again was that planning and organizing for space and transitions through the buildings was crucial, and taking extra time to do that, so that the 5 and 6 students would be separate from the 7 and 8 students. And I think Dr. Jefferson will tell us a little more about this later, but we visited Linfield Middle School, and the principal there is, he must be a wizard of some sort, because he managed to keep the kids so separate that, while the 7th graders are coming back from gym at one end of the building, the 5th graders are going to art at the other end of the building, and he's got it all worked out so that they really don't cross paths all that much. So there also needs to be thoughtful planning for transportation. And the districts who were happy with this model too also worked with their 8th graders around being role models, especially on the bus, because a lot of people are concerned about that, having a 5th grader on a bus with an 8th grader. And they did a lot of work with, kind of saying to the 8th graders, well, you're an 8th grader now, you get to sit in the back of the bus, and why don't you also, at the same time, keep an eye on the 5th graders? So there was an opportunity there for some leadership. There also needs to be well thought out transitions for students who receive special ed services and transitioning their IEPs. Sometimes, what's offered in the elementary school might need to be thought about differently when it's in the middle school. And then we also heard a lot from principals that parent input in general was really important when they did the transition through the year of transition. And it will be much like that in Beverly, where we have 5 elementary schools that have 5 different kind of cultures, and what things would each school bring to the new school as in 5th grade. So that said, we also looked at research, and we read a lot of articles. We read what we could find. I personally tried to Google it and learn about it any which way I could think about. what's the great thing about 6th grade, and is 5 to 8 better than 6 through 8, and you know, all these different ways of kind of Googling it. And we found no real hard data to reflect that academic scores were better in one configuration over the other. We learned that principals felt that there were positive influences on a 5 through 8 model. These positive influences were things like teachers and administrators get to know the students better because they're in the building longer. They have 4 years of, to pay attention to student growth, which is important. They're able to do cohesive writing programs across the 4 years, and they learn over time what interventions the students need. Teachers have more opportunities to meet and collaborate at grade level, and there are more opportunities for 5th graders to be exposed to expressive arts, technology, science, and social studies. And again, there are increased roles, leadership roles for 8th graders, but there's also increased leadership roles for 6th graders. And a lot of this is talking about the 5th graders being mixed with older students, but I also think about right now, our 6th graders, where they're at now. If we put 5th graders in a building with them, it gives them more leadership roles. 6th grade to me right now is kind of an island by itself. It is separate in the middle school, and so to give them another peer group to kind of associate with and work with, might be an advantage. During this whole process of researching and calling and talking to principals, there was one principal who called me because he received a questionnaire from us through email, and we had about 5 questions, and one of the questions was, what are the challenges of a 5 to 8 middle school? And he said, I really feel compelled to call you and tell you that no matter what configuration you have, there will always be challenges. So I was really glad to hear that because it made perfect sense to me. There are some interesting things, some interesting practices that we heard about along the way, and these might be things that we could keep in mind for future planning. Some of the schools had exploratory foreign language in grade 5. Right now, we have foreign language for our 6th graders, and our elementary students don't have exposure to foreign language at all unless you pay extra for an after-school program. In one instance, all 4 grades had recess, which I like that idea. And there were lots of different ideas about students being in leadership roles, whether it was 8th grade or even 5th grade or 6th grade, all the grades. And there were more specials for the 5th graders, art, music, and physical education. In one of the schools, I think it was Natick, the 8th graders had the one-to-one laptop program, which is what we have in our high school. What we did learn too is that if a school was not built to be a 5 to 8 middle school, it probably wasn't working too well. And so we also learned that there are some districts who are considering sending their 5th graders back to elementary school because they kind of didn't have the resources and the space and the forethought to make it work. It's hard to fit it into a building like that. I'm thinking we have an opportunity to create a building that fits what we need. Some of the things that we found in the research is that there's been a lot of debate about the ideal grade configuration, and there is a clear indication that there's no clear indication that one configuration is better than another when it comes to test results. And like I've already heard, more and more districts are considering the K to 8 model if they can fit it in their buildings. I was reading over and over again, though, that the 6 to 8 model is not the ideal. So what we have, I keep reading about, is not ideal. What the research keeps telling me is, if you're transitioning in grade 6, and that happens to be a tough transition year for you, it takes you almost until grade 8 to start getting back on your feet. And then it's time to transition again to high school. And there are many students who don't even get back on good standing until grade 10. In my opinion, that's not quite good enough. So there can be a huge dip in student achievement going into grade 6 and then right again in grade 8. We also learned that smaller schools make a difference. So in my mind's eye, I'm thinking 2 small schools within one big building. And having children over a larger span of time can make a difference as well. A lot of people are, I'm trying to keep up with Facebook and emails that are coming in and phone calls and so forth. And there's, been some criticism of us about not talking about what are the drawbacks in this. What are the drawbacks of a 5 to 8 middle school configuration? So some people might say that there's worry that 5th graders will grow up too quickly by being exposed to language and behavior of older students. That there would be lost leadership opportunities for 5th graders that they have now. That there'll be more competition for spots on things like student council and school plays. We as a district would have to rethink our EEC program because it would have to change. There are concerns about social pressures on 5th graders. There's also concern budgetary-wise about the loss of revenue from the McEwen building that we are getting right now in order to use it for pre-K. And then if the students who are at McEwen need to be bused somewhere else, is that going to cost us more money? So it's all these, there's lots of things we need to think about. And the other thing is that 5th graders would go from a school that has 2 to 3 5th graders in 5th grade classrooms in it to 9 or 10 5th grade classrooms. So it's a big jump. So. Oh, and then the other thing we have to think about is where is our central office going to be? Because right now that's at the Memorial Building. So overall, there are things that can be done to raise academic achievement, and some of it you've heard already, that we need thoughtful and thorough preparation for any transition into any school. And we need to have high expectations for learning and behavior for our students. We need to have robust after-school activities, highly qualified teachers, and above all, safe schools. A bunch of this we have already, and we should never compromise on these. So tomorrow we have a vote coming up, and we are hoping to decide which model we want to have after doing the research, after hearing from people, after hearing from you tonight, and we'll consider all of what we're hearing. We have an opportunity to take Beverly in a new direction in addition to creating the space that we need. And we need to tell the Mass Building Association or Authority how big we want our school to be, and we need to have that decided. So, we've been listening, we've been paying attention to what you're sending us, what emails are coming in, and what's the chatter on Facebook. And again, I thank you for coming and listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
First, I want to say how impressed I am at the work of the staff, the administration, and the school committee for the preparation that you've done. You've taken all of my talking points. But more importantly, I think it's important to appreciate these folks for the countless hours that they have put into this. I mean, a 21-year process is extraordinary.
I think I'm the only one that went from 21 to now.
A few years ago, I had a chance to be part of a delegation that visited some schools in China. And one of the interesting differences was how quickly they did things there. So the host school who was having me for a few days there showed me a model on the headmaster's desk of this enormous campus. This was going to be a high school for 6,000 students, beautiful buildings and plantings. And we stayed in email contact, and literally 9 months later, they were putting in the final touches. So that we talk about something, where Mike talks about going years into the future, we're looking at something that's been very deliberate and I think well thought out. So you're very well served by these folks. And I say that to you as an educator and also as a Beverly citizen. I do have some experience with 5 to 8 schools, both in Linfield where we have them, and I think we've touched on some of the key points there. Also in Long Meadow, where I was on the school committee in Herrick, they had 5 through 8 schools. So I experienced firsthand the advantages of what those had. And as well, I once upon a time taught 5th grade, which was a great experience, although that was during the first Reagan administration, so I've forgotten most of what had to do with that. When Dr. Genziano asked me to speak, I spent some time and wrote down what I thought the advantages and disadvantages were of the model, and I'll share those with you. Most of them you've heard. There were 9 and 4, but none of the 4 are insurmountable. One obvious advantage is equity. That if all the kids are coming to 5th grade in the same place, they all have the same opportunities for programming. You don't have, at one school the class sizes are smaller than the others. At one school they're able to do this and they're not able to do that. So that's a huge advantage in a community where not all the schools are going to have space every year. Things are going to be in fluctuation. Second, and this has been touched on, is the flexibility that you have in classroom design. By having the 5th grade in the middle school, you don't give up any options. If you want to have self-contained classrooms, you can have self-contained classrooms. But beyond that, if you want to have teams of various models, you can do that. We actually have our 5th graders in teams that have 3 teachers with them. I don't know how it's worked from your perspective if you had a 5th grader go through there. And we've got staff from Linfield Middle School as well. We're very pleased with what's happening. It's allowed for some specialization that was needed, and quite honestly, we've seen a dramatic increase in our student performance through implementing that model. Now, that wasn't, we had all the 5th graders there before, but again, we had the flexibility to try something different that has worked better. Third is the issue of collaboration with all teachers. Once upon a time, teaching was a more individual activity than it is today. The advantage of having 9 or 10 teachers at a grade level working together and building on curriculum, on common assessments, on thinking through those things, on sorting out the problems and challenges is a very powerful one. We've heard about the specialized programs. And one of the real benefits that we saw in Long Meadow was with respect to the music program, to have the kids have some of the same staff members for 4 years, and the capacity there. And Beverly has a world-class music program. And I think this model would probably only help that in going forward. So that would probably increase those opportunities. And we've also talked about things like world language that are going to be easier to schedule. Kind of a note that I'll talk about a little bit in some of the other considerations has to do with physical education space. I've not ever seen a school or a community that built enough gymnasiums. So if there is any chance in the world, even if it means some of it's not coming at the 55% reimbursement, to have that extra gym space, both for scheduling the classes during the day and for community use, that's a great opportunity. One of the really beautiful things that we have at this stage is the opportunity to design for what we're looking to do. Now that impacts a lot of things. We heard that how you structure schools and how you plan them out has a lot to do with how successful they are. And this would be an opportunity to do that, to build it from the ground up with particular instructional goals in mind. One of the things that is a challenge that I would encourage folks to be very aware of has to do with the traffic situation. Because no kids drive to a middle school, or very few do. If they do, they probably have other problems. So thinking about what it means to have 1,300 kids coming in, we don't have a great situation in Linfield in the morning traffic. We put a school of 850 kids on sort of a busy road, and there's no left turn lane to get into the school parking lot, so traffic does back up there. So I think to think that through at the beginning, and to have a chance to design a perfect traffic situation from the beginning is a tremendous opportunity. It makes all the difference in the world. So that's an area where I wouldn't skimp in terms of the planning and the expenditures. I think we've heard, and I would support that, being in a school for 4 years can help create a stronger sense of identity for a middle school model. I think that makes a lot of sense. I was a principal in one district where we had K through 6 schools, which was great. I was an elementary principal there. I loved the kids, and it was only 600 kids at its highest year, so I still pretty much knew them all by name. But then they were only in middle school for 2 years. And I go to the middle school, and I would know more kids than the principal did there because they weren't there long enough for the parents to get invested and for the kids to get invested. So that 4-year block has some real advantages for that. A big area is financial advantages. And I think there's 2 parts of this that I want you to realize, and I share the burden for this as a taxpayer with you. The first is the cost of constructing space. We have a project here where we have a chance to get state reimbursement at a fairly 55%, did I hear is the number? That's a pretty good deal. So we're paying for less than half of it as Beverly taxpayers, and the state is paying for the rest. So this is an opportunity you don't always get. But the other part is you're also going to see reduced ongoing expenses. There will be more efficiency in staffing, and that will result in annual savings. That will be hard to extract and measure. You're not going to be able to look at 10 years and say, well, the budget would have been this if we had 6th through 8, but now it's this because we have 5th grade. But trust me, you will save money each and every year with this model. And that money can go into expanding programs and keeping classes down and keeping taxes down. Again, state construction costs is a huge thing. And also not to be underestimated is the issue of opening up space in the elementary schools. Schools of today have more programs and more specialized needs than they did when I went to school, or when some of you went to school, which was much later than when I went to school. But be cognizant of the fact that there are those needs for school adjustment counselors, for occupational therapists, for more tutorial space than we once needed. And most elementary schools weren't built for that. And from what I can gather, we're at a space crunch at all of them. So you actually not only get a great new space for the middle school students, but you get a bonus that each of the remaining elementary schools all of a sudden feels like somebody let the air out of the tires that were about to blow up. So that's a huge opportunity for them. And there again, I want to talk about the financial advantages and opportunities for the special education department. We're probably had a chance to be ahead of you in that process because we've had some space. And at Linfield over the last 2 or 3 years, we've reduced our operating budget substantially because we've been able to work with some of those families who've been out of district or who otherwise would have gone out of district and say, we can take that tuition and that transportation cost and that paraprofessional cost and add them up and do our own program internally. And it's a win-win venture. It's a win for the kids because they wind up getting to come to their neighborhood schools. And that's what the mandate of least restrictive environment means. That you have a chance to go to school with your brothers and sisters. You have a chance to go to the school that's near your house. So the programs that you're able to potentially bring to both the elementary schools and to the middle schools will be significant. And there are a lot of savings that can be realized from that. We have, 121 students are out of district in Beverly now. That's not a number way out of whack with what you might expect. But if we were to create opportunities for many of those kids to come back, it would have to have a space component, which we don't have now. So that's taken off the table. Here what I saw is the disadvantages. There will be some students for whom it will be a daunting transition to come from a neighborhood school to a bigger mid school. But quite honestly, it's going to be daunting whenever they do it, in some cases. And if the staff is working and thinking about what are the routines and rituals that make that happen, that will help. In Linfield, we have this great ice cream social the first day of school in the afternoon. Now, there's only 2 schools that feed into the middle school. And quite honestly, in a small town, most of the kids know each other already anyway. But those kinds of things, in terms of how the children are sent off from the elementary schools and received in the middle school, would be important to do that. The other part of that is I often hear that parents feel less welcome in middle schools than they do in elementary schools. That's a universal phenomenon. And it's not really a function of the schools. It's a function of the age of the kids. Your 6th grader doesn't want you around in the school the same way that your 6-year-old did. Now, I know you've got preschoolers in kindergarten and kindergartens, but there's going to be a day when they're sitting in the back of the car and you're driving around and they see their friends and they're going to slide down so they're not seen with you. That's a natural cycle, but as adorable as they are as preschoolers and kindergartens, that's going to change a little bit. I'm very impressed with what I've heard in terms of the culture and the invitation that exists in the middle school, and I think it's what you make of it in terms of inviting it, and it sounds like we've done a great job of making parents included and involved. Talked about traffic, which is something to be very cognizant of. Again, a well-developed plan. And I know this community has spent more time thinking about traffic than any community. So maybe we can get like a little extra work from the consultants that we're bringing in for the Humboldt Avenue piece. And they can help through it. But seriously, one of the things I had a chance to do as an elementary school principal was to redesign the playground and the roads that led into drop-off and pick-up. What a difference it made. We could dismiss a school of 600 kids in about a minute and a half, because we've been able to figure out from scratch exactly how it works. So those are important operational questions, so that the logistics of 1,500 kids doesn't squelch what's there. And the last one, and I don't think this is really a factor from what I gather. If you do a larger project here, does that put you at a disadvantage in future elementary school projects? It looks like the elementary schools are in pretty good shape, and the thing you need now is immediate space rather than any massive renovation projects or such. So all in all, from my perspective as a superintendent, as a former principal, and an educator, and somebody who's had a child in their 5-8 school, it seems like a real winner in terms of everything for the citizens of Beverly. I would like to reiterate that there's really no research to say that there's one model that's necessarily better than the other. The quality of education is really more grounded in who the teachers are and what the curriculum is and what you give kids who come to school than it is in the model. So there's no magic bullet out there. But I don't think there's anything that you sacrifice when you have a 5-grade model. Keep a lot of doors open. And the other piece that I had in my notes that we talked about is really thinking through what the administrative models and designs are so that you can keep a level of intimacy. We've got teams that are, the Vikings and the Explorers, and we kind of used a space theme to name some of them, and it gives a nice feel for it. Next year we're expanding that to 7th and 8th grade, where we're going to have 4-person teams at each grade level to really make it a true middle school rather than the junior high school that I went to. So good luck with the venture, and again, thank you for all of your work on behalf of the students of Beverly.
Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. Do you have a second microphone? Okay. So we're now at the point where we want to hear from you. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be getting this mic around a lot. Thank you for stand. So we can go just about here. So it's your turn. If you've got something you want to ask, something you want to share, and you're willing to come up here to say it, we can make sure that everything's heard, and then we'll try to respond to anything you ask. And please start with your name and maybe just your name.
Hi, I'm Kira Fabrizio. I have 2 kids here at Cove. So I have a few questions. I'm going to try not to go through a huge long list. So obviously space is a huge issue, and having more space in elementary schools is a really pressing issue for lots and lots of reasons. So I'm wondering why we're not considering reopening whichever elementary school was closed just before I moved here to Beverly, in addition to building the school as a 6th through 8. Why is that not the solution to the space? I haven't heard anybody talk about that. With the idea that, we're going to keep growing, and I just wonder if we build this special design of this building so that we have this 2 schools and 1 middle school, and it's special for that, as we continue growing, are we then going to end up needing to open that elementary school anyways, and then decide to put the 5th back down, and then we have a middle school building that's the wrong design for us? So I'd like to hear a little bit of that. And then I hear you're voting tomorrow, and I just wonder, since we're voting before we're getting to design the building, if we vote for a 5 through 8, but then find that a design with this 2 school and 1 approach isn't going to work for budgetary or space issues, can you switch back to the 6 through 8 model, or is the vote binding?
Lots of questions within questions. So I'll take a stab and then hand it off as needed. To the second question first, we've been working with the school building authority to determine our enrollment projections. If we go 6-8, if we go 5-8, what is the size of school that we'll be building? What are the number of students we're projecting? And that's a pretty exhaustive process. And, so they've been pushing a number at us, we've been pushing a bigger number at them, and we're trying to get to the point where we acknowledge the type of growth in population that can be expected going forward on a number of fronts. So if we choose to build a 5-8 school, it will be built hopefully right-sized in terms of the number of kids that we can expect to go there, and will accommodate a number of kids. We're looking right now, if we go 5-8, it'll be about a 1,400 student school. They've agreed that it'll be about a 350 kids per grade level. the vote itself, so when we go to design the school, 6-8 or 5-8, the design will be based upon that. The cost, there's a formula. They've built hundreds of schools since they kind of reorganized and recreated the school building authority about 8 years ago. And so, there's a formula to it all, and we will agree with them on a design, an amount of square feet based on the number of kids that will go to the school. And so there wouldn't really be a need to back off of the grade configuration based on design and cost. That's all something that we're all planning. The vote that we'll be taking tomorrow night is a vote that I don't think once we take it, any of us will be looking to turn and go back from. But it is not it's not something you can never revisit, if that answers your question. And we will be, from now until breaking ground on building the school, as you know, it's going to be a little bit of time. So during that time, we'll be going through all of that work. I think it's fair to say that nobody will be looking to turn back from the decision we make, but it's not absolutely written in stone if something really showed itself that needed to have us reconsider. As far as McEwen and other space concerns, I should have said earlier, and I left it out, if we build a 5 to 8, we can address the space needs of our pre-K through 8th grade population with one project. And one project that we hope will be done in somewhere between 3 and 4 years' time from now. If we choose to build a 6 to 8 middle school, we will still have significant space needs and concerns from our pre-K through grade 5 population that we'll have to address in multiple additional school building projects that would take us on a longer timetable to do. So these are among the considerations that go into the vote we'll be taking. If as we're looking at a middle school that we hope to walk through the doors of and begin to use between 3 and 4 years from now, if we do go 6 to 8, we're talking years out from that. I don't know how many. And we're talking probably expansions or additions on 3 of our 5 elementary schools to meet the needs that would continue to exist. As far as McEwen was built too small. It has 14 classrooms. The rest of our elementaries have anywhere from 17 to 23 or 24. I don't think reopening it would really be the solution. One thing that I've come to understand is the fewer elementary schools you have, the more you can control or more you can balance out class sizes. And adding back another elementary school would just exacerbate that problem in kind of big swings in class sizes within a grade level across the district. We do have significant income that we take today from the McEwen School that our regional collaborative pays to run a high school program there. That's a consideration, but another consideration is that our preschool kids need a home, and that may well be the answer for them. We have 8 classes of preschool kids now, 4 of them in the memorial building, 4 of them in rented space at the collaboratives building up the hill from the high school. And we also have, as has been said, our whole central office staff. In addition to that, we have multiple municipal offices at Memorial, and we're going to need to find a home for them as well. So there are a lot of space needs. There are other considerations for how to use McEwen going forward that I think have been part of our considerations. Other people want to weigh in? Okay.
Actually, let me just add one thing. I think the thing about McEwen we need to consider is that, as Michael said, it's a small building. So basically, numbers-wise, we're looking to move 350 fifth graders out of all the elementary buildings with this 5-day project. The McEwen building at most can hold 200 to 225, I think, if you fill every seat in that building. And so right from the start, you're looking at not creating the same amount of space in your elementary buildings by reopening McEwen. Secondly, you're going to have to do a district-wide redistricting of all the elementary buildings in order to fill McEwen. And chances are what you're going to do when you do that is you're going to take 2 or 3 third graders from this classroom, 2 or 3 fourth graders from that classroom. And so I think what you'll end up with is improved class sizes in each of the elementary buildings, but you're not actually going to be opening up classroom space as you would if you were fifth grade as a whole out of the elementary buildings. So I know it's an attractive option, especially if you live over by the neighborhood, but I think looking at the whole picture, and that's what we have to do as school committee members, we have to look at from K through 12, we have to look at students from ages 3 to 22 and figure out what's the best model for all of those students for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think when we look at that, we take a long, hard look at it, building a new middle schools is something we need to do as a community. When we look at the various models, it might be that the 5 to 8 model is no better, no worse than the 6 to 8 model academically, and it provides a lot of opportunities, as Mr. Plaska said, for program development, for reducing space limitations in the elementary school. It solves a lot of our problems in one project, as opposed to, okay, we fixed this building, now we have to look at the next building and the next building and the next building. That's all I'm saying. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Carrie Veritas. I have a child at Cove and a child who's coming into first grade next year. So she would be one of the students affected. I want to say, first of all, that almost all the questions I have coming in here, you've answered pretty well, which is good. So I have to work off notes on me after that. I'm a school teacher myself. I work in high school, and I specifically like, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, when you spoke about leadership of the older students. I feel, so I'm going to start with a statement, then I'm going to ask 2 questions. I feel that a definite focus, if we're going to move the 5th graders to that environment, needs to be on the whole school culture and the social emotional piece of those younger students. From whether the 8th graders are watching out for them on the bus and constant conversations, you know, between teachers and adjustment counselors and various things. What are the challenges about having that many multiple ages? Because 4 years is great, but anyone who's worked with those age groups knows it is a vast 4 years of change between what they will start at and what they will leave at. So that's my statement of that. And so to speak to that, years down the road, everything you said sounds like it'll work great if we do all that. But at what point do we get to the community revisit and say, is this working? Do I get to say my voice and say, you know what? This is what's going on. This is what my friends are saying is going on. What are we doing about that? What are we addressing? Like we're talking about it now. Are we going to revisit it? So that's question 1. And then secondly, I've heard a lot about research and administration, but I haven't heard much about students who have experienced these environments and what they feel about them. And when does that piece?
Yes.
So I'll just speak to your last question about the children. So Kathy White here and I went to Natick, so good names, and we visited, and one of the people that we had the incredible experience of being able to sit down and speak with is right now like an English chair, but she was not an English chair when they switched their school from the 6 to 8 to the 5 to 8. She was actually the PTO president, and she had a 4th grader at the time, so it was going to be directly affected by the change. And it was really kind of cool because one of the things she said to us was, come ask a Natick parent now, ask those children, and that if you move into the community and it's already that model, it's okay. But it's that 1 year of the change that is tumultuous, right? So there's all kinds of books written about change, and people don't like change, it's human nature. So relative to a little bit about your first point, I coach middle school basketball, and we've had 5 through 8, and I absolutely agree with the difference in between the 5s and the 8s, and I see that every year, and I have a new batch of kids every year, and my previous batch moves up. But I also see how those children watch out for each other, and we do community service as a group, and I think that there is a culture there, and when you cultivate that, it absolutely can work well. In my role as a basketball coach, I have a whole bunch of, as I call them, saints. So we have St. John's, we have St. Mary's, I have children from the Glen Urquhart School, I have children from Brookwood, right? It's in any school in Beverly. And a lot of those schools are K-8 models. So my personal research has been to go ask some of those parents, how are your children doing on the bus? Because they all get on the same bus. There's maybe even only one bus for that whole school, right? And so all those children get on that bus, and what I've heard the most through email and Facebook and chatter is the concern about the bus. Because if we can build the school correctly, and we can build the schedules correctly, that they never, the two shall meet, still you have the bus. So I have not found a single parent, and I've been coaching middle school basketball for more years than I care to admit, 18. I have not found a single Catholic school parent in all those years, or a Glen Ercott parent, or a Brookwood parent that would say to me, oh, it's terrible that the children were mixed. And that has been kind of my personal goal, is to seek out those parents and talk to them so that I could say firsthand, here's an experience. We have several of them right here in Beverly, and in fact, it's working. It's working, unfortunately, a little too well, in the sense that so many children leave the public schools. In our last meeting, Dr. Argenziano spoke to how few, our percentage of students that come to Beverly Public Schools compared to neighboring towns. So we're down to about 80%, and the average town is about 87 or 88%, you said, right? So we have a tremendous amount more children who leave the public schools to go to private schools. But my point is that if you look at those private schools right here in Beverly, they are K-8, and all those children get on that bus. And the culture obviously works, otherwise all those schools would not still be in business with a lot of Beverly children enrolled in them.
I just want to add, as somebody who talks to fifth graders every week in the cafeteria, that they're fine with it. They really have no problem. They love it. They're happy. They're mixed. They're content. So if they're in a safe, comfortable environment, they're going to be thriving. So I don't think that we would have to worry about, you know, that sense of connection. So.
Thank you. And then more to your first point and question that came off of it. You know, if we choose to go 5 to 8, we've got 3+ years to plan. We have some great models to learn from. You know, there are somewhere in the 20s the number of school districts that we've been able to look to and ask questions of who have 5 to 8. Swampscott, Linfield, and Wakefield are 3 nearby communities that are 5 to 8. And we've had, you know, we've got Dr. Jefferson here tonight. We have had middle school principals from each of those 3 districts with us at past forums, and they've had some interesting things to say. One of the kind of drum beats that we've heard from them is, you can build a 6-8, you can build a 5-8. If you do it right, you're going to be happy with it. You're going to have success. That being, you know, with a 5 to 8 building, you got to build it in a way that you can have a lower school and an upper school and keep them substantially separate. But then you've got to structure it in a way that works for us, right? For our community and for our kids. And so we've got time to do that and do that right. And then your question about will it be revisited? Well,
you know, will the community get to weigh in as once it's already implemented?
Sure. I mean, if we go 5-8 and we plan for the next few years to implement it, then I think we'll want a little bit of implementation time. But I think any of us who, I think anybody who's not willing to, you know, keep their eyes and ears open and kind of revisit, you know, where they're at and challenge the assumptions that went into that decision and make sure that they hold up. And if they're not holding up, doing something about it. You know, doing something about it doesn't necessarily mean reversing course, but maybe figuring out, you know, is there something we should be doing differently or better to ensure the success? I know we have fantastic professionals in our school district who currently prepare our 5th graders for a successful transition to Briscoe, and then tremendous professionals at Briscoe who welcome them and make it work. And if we go 5-8, we'll have that same dynamic in place to prepare 4th graders and then welcome 5th graders. So that's, you know, something that we all have to keep in mind and we'll be working on going forward if that's the way we go.
Okay, so let me just have one more. So in terms of evaluation and reevaluation, it's all we do really. Members of the school committee, we provide oversight for the budget programs. We write policy that sets the broad guidelines on how the schools are administered. It's really all we do is sit back every meeting, every day, say how can we do better, And so this group is going to do that for the next 2 years, and then 2 years after that, it's going to be a different group. And at some point, you have to all ask yourself, what role am I going to play? So you may be sitting up here in a couple of years, and that's going to be your turn to say, how can I make the Beverly school system better? And that might be looking at a middle school configuration or an elementary school grade configuration. But the process never ends, and never should end. We should all be involved in that every day. And you're involved with it now because you're here asking these questions, and we're involved with it because we're sitting up here, but that process is ongoing potential.
Next. And as, next. Come on up. And as you're doing so, I was remiss. I want to recognize City Councilor at Large, Matt St. Hilaire, who's been, I think, at all 5 of our forums. And, okay, well, it seems like everyone. And Matt also has young kids, so I think he's interested both as a dad and as a city councilor. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Emily Contos. I have a daughter who's in first and then twins that will be somewhere in the system at some point. So I guess, first I want to thank you guys for all of the work you're presenting. I think that it's great that you're coming and offering us, parents, the information. I was, I guess it's more of a statement and then a question in terms of the data, the kind of qualitative data. You've done extensive work in terms of going out, talking to the schools, and getting that type of feedback, which I think is really invaluable. But I was wondering in terms of quantitative data, in terms of, if we looked at, 5th grade MCAS scores in, the 5 through 8 model versus 6 through 8, because there is research, there's a fair number of studies that are showing that the academic scores for K through 5 versus 5 to 6, it's better in K through 5. It's also better if 6th graders are actually in elementary. And then also discipline issues arising, which is not academic. But so there is empirical data out there showing that there is a difference between, the 5 through 8 versus the 6 through 8. So I was just wondering in Massachusetts, because this research, the empirical data that I found is not based in Massachusetts. Have we looked at, has there been a look at MCAS scores in terms of?
I like to think that I did all the homework. You know what I was finding is research that was from around the country, and it was very difficult to nail down anything that said one configuration was better than the other. I kept finding over and over again that transition into a shorter span of years was problematic, and that could bring down test scores, but there was nothing solid that I could kind of bring to you and put in front of people. And I'm sorry to say that because it was just really hard to find. I read the Harvard School of Education research papers on this. And I actually have a friend who works at Harvard and said, "Were you part of this and can you help me out?" And it was just really difficult to find anything. So I'm sorry to say, yeah, the homework that I did, and maybe somebody can find something more and share with us, but that's where I'm at with it.
Let's do this. If you've got some data that you want to share, please do it at the end of tonight. Let's talk, and we'll give that a look.
But I was just wondering in Massachusetts, wouldn't we just have to look at MCAS scores?
Sure.
I didn't
So
do that.
again, please give us what you've got, because we'll want to look at that.
I mean, it's an interesting question, a fair question. I can offer one small piece of anecdotal information on Linfield. And it does pertain to this discussion because we reorganized our 5th grade. We had pairs, teams of 2. And we weren't getting the results that we were looking for in math in particular. This is no secret to the Linfield folks. We've talked a lot about it. It's been in years. The reconfiguration that we did into broader teams resulted in an extraordinary increase. Our MCAS scores for 5th graders in math they went up 20 points. They're slightly above the state average, and then they went up to the highest tier, which is, we think, where they should have been. I can't say it's because they were in a 5th grade model that was in the middle school, but I will say that having the number of kids gave us more flexibility in thinking about instructional designs. So I think from that perspective, you do have more flexibility. I asked the same question of the superintendent at Long Meadow 20 years ago when my son was approaching that grade level. His answer then was that there didn't seem to be any hard impairment. Being the oldest child in the school, you know, heard about sitting in the back of the bus. So in many ways, a fourth grader's not too young to have that experience. They have it meaningful. It's a little bit different than it is. If you have sixth graders in an elementary school, you might, you know, have a more involved closure activity. But in Linfield, it's worked very well. So I think it's a great rite of passage and opportunity for kids.
Okay. And thanks. We've been getting great questions tonight, by the way. Thank you.
This is kind of an observation through the discussion that I'm hearing now that occurred to me. We're talking a lot about transitions and limiting transitions. And one of the reasons why transitions can be difficult is it's a huge gap that our children haven't prepared for. But I love the idea of this lower school and upper school, and there can actually be within that comfort zone a transition. I teach in a school that has a model similar to that, and I know that when our kids move from 6th grade to 7th grade, they feel like they have moved to a different school, even though we're right next door. And to keep that very sense of having that, you know, community of 5th, 6th, and then a different community of 7, 8. Now they've got all that practicing transition, and they're getting used to that. And we find that our 8th graders, their transition to high school is easy because it's not as developmentally jumpy. So when they're going through that biggest developmental jump, they still get that feel of moving to a new place and transitioning still within a very comforting. So just as you're developing this, that's a cool idea. Just like,
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Drag a chair
I
right.
am not a public speaker, so excuse me if I shake, but I just want to talk a little bit more about taking the 5th graders out of the school and the future plan of bringing full-day kindergarten into the schools. Mrs. Oliver told us recently that next year we're probably not going to have our science room because of space issues. So if we take 3 5th grade classes out of our school, then that means in, you know, future years we might have 2 extra classrooms because we'd be able to get our science room back. So is that really enough space to bring kindergarten into the school when we already do have, you know, teachers, special educators working in closets and hallways?
Good question. For our school, we already have 3 full-day kindergarten classes. So I don't anticipate adding many more for kindergarten for this building. So I think we're stable at the moment, but it's a good question.
Now, district-wide, this year we have 9 full-day and 5 half-day kindergarten classes. So if we were to...
No, it's not, because we have 16 kindergarten teachers altogether.
Well, let me just say, somewhere in the order of it, if we were to, if with 2 half-day kindergarten classes, you were able to utilize 1 classroom and 1 teacher, right? We need to add probably district-wide 3 or 4 classrooms at this point to be able to go full-day kindergarten, right?
Well, we have about 13 full-day kindergarten classrooms right now across the district, and half days we have 2.5, so those 2 are actually 4 sessions altogether. One thing we did this year, because we were lacking in space, is we increased the minimum for kindergarten. We used to cap at 20. We went up to 22 for this year because we wanted to make sure everybody who wanted full day had the opportunity for full day. So one of the things we were looking at, and when somebody had talked about, when you had talked about how we considered with the new building doing pre-K and K as a wing on that building, that was never considered. One of the things that would happen with that, if you take into consideration based on our current numbers this year, we're talking the need for 19 approximately kindergarten classrooms alone. And again, we have our preschool programs on 2 sites off of the elementary schools. One is up at KOG on Sawyer Road, and the other is at the Memorial Building. That's 8 classrooms in addition that we need for that wing. So we're talking kind of a really large expansion onto a model that would be pre-KK at the middle school. If we did that, then you're adding on therapy rooms and all those other things. So we can, in looking at the structure right now and considering the need for some of the schools to take back their their science rooms, we could take and consider a full day program across the district, relook at that 22 cap and taking it down and have space to place all of our kindergartens. And also consider at the same time bringing the kindergartners back to their home school to start, rather than having some kindergartners out of their home school district. So we do have the ability to do that. I will say numbers do fluctuate. I think in looking at our numbers going forward, we're pretty stable in the projections. So this was a bubble year too. We had a larger number of kindergarten registrants across the district. So this is a high number for us this year. So I answered that question.
Sorry.
No, that's good.
I think I have a statement and then maybe one more question. I feel a little bit like a parent where I come to a meeting tonight and hear that you're voting on something tomorrow night, that how much weight are our questions going to have when you only have a 24-hour period to think about them?
But we can't control the weather. So this meeting at Cove should have been a week ago, Thursday, 10 days ago. So.
Right, I understand that. I just want to say that I hope in your meeting tomorrow that one of your considerations is possibly delaying your vote, because I feel like some of the new issues that people have brought up tonight warrant further research before making this type of large decision. And then my last question is about the new superintendent and how involved he's been in this process and what his opinion is on the matter.
I reached out to the new superintendent and I asked him this question. I asked him to weigh in on this because I felt like he's going to be left with whatever our decision is, and it's kind of not fair to, leave him with that by involving him. I know Dr. Argenziano has been in constant contact with him, not only about this, but about our budget and all of our school stuff, because he's coming on board very soon. I feel like I'm going to blink and it'll be April. His response to me was that he has worked in many districts with many configurations, and he's confident that the educators in Beverly will, whatever we decide, will do the best that they know how to do. And again, that's our only decision, is to vote 5 to 8 or 6 to 8. After that, we leave it up to the educators in the district, at which time Dr. Hershey will be at the helm. So he really didn't say to me one way or the other if he was, biased either way. He has worked in all different districts that have all different configurations.
So I'm Nate, first grader here this year, and preschool here next year. So pretty exciting all the way around. But I think I just would encourage you guys to do something of the work of setting up sort of both quantitative and qualitative. If you don't have an analyst, she's probably the one over there to assess, like, from a feedback perspective, especially parents who have kids who are going to experience it both ways. You know what I'm saying? So that you have particularly pointed questions that are put to them, or a collection of them across the city. And potentially also, I don't know if there's any way to take the quantitative piece that we have in terms of performance and replicate what the MCAS have now, or sort of do something similar to that along the way, so that our 4th grade, 5th grade sort of swing is evaluated at some level from an academic standpoint as well. That's just an idea to encourage you guys to think of that's possible to do, and to maybe put a strategy in place to evaluate. Nobody's been doing research on this stuff or giving us our ground to stand on for like or like the impact of it. And I think that would be, we'd be helping our community and others as well by having some sort of some pie charts we could throw out to them to say satisfaction is this or that against this question or whatever, you know, that type of thing. And just have a listening device in place for us to be able to say, you know, how are parents, how are students? I don't know if you guys talk to your students in that way from Linfield or not, but I can't imagine that it would be hard for you to come up with simple ways to get Q&A to them, you know, so that type of thing. So it's just some suggestions more than like questions for you guys to consider.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, excuse me. You've been here with us for 2 hours, so thank you for taking the time. Again, I said it a few minutes ago, but some fantastic questions and thoughts and suggestions. And we do take them all to heart. So thank you again for being here. Our meeting tomorrow night will be both televised live, yes, and open, no, not live, taped, and open to you at room 164, Memorial. And then that starts at 7:30. Thanks again to all of our folks for the presentations, and especially Dr. Jefferson for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful night.